there's something that happens when you get uncomfortable, is that you develop this sense of, when you practice getting uncomfortable, you develop this kind of a swell of confidence, because you establish this belief that you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You can make it, right? You'll be okay.
Welcome to the Impact Roadmap, a podcast designed to give you the practical, concrete steps to grow your nonprofit or future-forward business in a sustainable way. I'm your host, Joey Goon. Let's get into the episode. Hey friends, welcome to the Impact Roadmap. Today, I am joined by my new friend, Andy Way. Andy, I'm so excited to have you here today. There's a lot that we have to unpack, and the work that you're doing is a work that the world needs right now. So tell us a little bit more about your bio and your life story and why we're here today.
Yeah, well, we're here because we met at a National Speakers Association event, right?
We did.
But we're here in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a little bit of a fish out of water. I grew up on a small island in Savannah, Georgia, called Isle of Hope. There's about 2,000 people on the island, and when people ask where I'm from, I'm typically where I grew up. I'm kind of grew up like Huck Finn with a motor on the Intercoastal Waterway in Savannah, Georgia. So. Yeah, and then, left there in my senior year in high school, lived on a sailboat in Austin, Texas, and then wanted to engage in something bigger than myself, joined the Navy, and served out of Japan, and landed here back in the U.S., here in St. Louis, and here I am.
You, you spent 3/4 of your year while you were in the Navy on a naval ship. What was that life like for you?
Well, I thought it was amazing. One of the things that I loved about it, I was always kind of raised a patriot, lover of being an American, and then engaging in something bigger than ourselves, right? And I wanted a big experience. Growing up on a small island, right? And I was always curious about the world. And I remember having stacks and stacks of National Geographic magazines, and just that kind of that natural boyish sense of adventure and curiosity. So joined the service. I accidentally kind of wound up graduating third in my class from avionics school, and I got to choose where I was going to go. But unfortunately, Sigonella, Sicily, and Rota, Spain were taken. So I went bigger and went all the way around the world to Japan. And we were forward deployed 8 months out of the year, and I served on the flight deck of a carrier launching planes. So
what were you doing there? So launching planes for what specifically?
Well, we're the Navy's only forward deployed 911 battle group. So that means in case of emergency, we were always at the ready. And so if we were not actively involved in a scenario, then we were actively training. And so that's what we were always doing.
So does that mean if there's a foreign,
yeah,
something foreign detected on your radar, you're sending jets out to figure out whether or not that's a threat?
Well, so we're on a carrier. Every single plane that launches, they're called sorties. And every squadron has a sortie completion rate. And so, every plane that launches has a mission. And that comes down from the Department of Defense. There's a code every single day. You are a battle group. There's about 9,000 people in that battle group. And so we were out to sea 8 months out of the year. And that means we were training usually in the East, but also in the Middle East. Spent 6 months in the Persian Gulf, and then across the Indian Ocean back to Perth and back into our normal area. But yeah, always just practicing and training.
Just also want to share my gratitude for your service.
Happy to. Thank you. It was an honor.
You've gone from this naval jet commander to a motivational speaker and author. How do you make that shift or that leap in your life from where you were to where you are now?
I think a lot of people like to think of life as very linear. It absolutely isn't. It doesn't matter how well you plan. I think everybody can relate to the idea that life doesn't always turn out like we think it will. It certainly has not for me. And my boyish sense of adventure was planted in me when I was 13. And for some reason, my father, God love him, wanted to give his son a boat when he turned 13. And so at 13, I was running around the Intercoastal Waterway like Huck Finn, because it's like this sense of adventure. I had a pet porpoise for a summer, and had all kinds of amazing experiences. And so I've had this kind of relationship with adventure in me. I think a lot of boys, right? from the time I was a young boy. But after the Navy, I came back to the U.S., and it wasn't much later that I found myself a single father with a 1.5-year-old in a new city with no family, and then that starts a whole nother chapter. So it doesn't always go the way we think it will, but and we can dig into how I got connected deeper with my relationship with adventure. But that happened when my son started to struggle.
Yeah, let's talk about your son, because I know that's a big part of your journey and your why. I believe we can live the most about life from those that were fighting for it. And your son was fighting for his life at a point at a point where he was going through these impressionable years, trying to find himself. How did you become how did you kind of help him get through this tragedy, this trauma that he was going through, and get him through to the other side of that? And then I guess as a follow-up to that question, or to build on that question, how did that then become like the essence or the flavor that that is now a part of your life work and your coachings and your training?
Yeah, that's really kind of how that unfolded. When Drew was, I think he was like 11 or 12, he's in 6th grade, and he really started to struggle with anxiety and overwhelm. And there was a lot there. But when you're in it, it's kind of a slow evolutionary process as this experience unfolded. And then that led to pretty severe drug and alcohol abuse. And so, of course, I always wanted to be the best father I could. I love my dad. I thought he did a great job of being there for me as a young man. And I always looked up to my father. Of course, as I got older, the cape came off at some point, right?
Yeah.
But, I was always paying attention to parent and child relationships. I read all the books from the time he was born about parenting, modern day culture, raising boys in America today. And I had no answers for how to help him. And in the dark night of the soul part of that story, I really struggled. I poured everything I had into him, and we had to get help. Of course, we sought help quickly, but another level. And it's, a lot of people can't really relate to all we experienced, but it became very challenging for me. I had remarried, and I was a single dad for 7 years. And I'd done well in real estate, but then lost everything. And so with the recession, right, in 2007, 8, 9. So I was and those were strangely some of the happiest years with nothing. But when he really started to struggle, it crushed me. And he wound up going to residential therapeutic boarding school. We had to get real help. And that was really hard to do.
Before we hit record, we talked about the difference in, like raising teens, raising kids today, as opposed to like when you and I were kids just a short time ago. We're still young and spry.
Right.
But let's talk about like what are, because like now, I was talking to a friend, Laura, the other day, and she was telling me that now, kids are being trained on like active shooter training. What happens if someone comes into the school and there's a threat? And it's like, we couldn't even conceptualize that being a thing 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So do you think that's part of the problem, is that the expectations and what we think we know as parents is just like, we need to kind of throw away what we think we know and just get more curious and ask questions about what our kids are really going through?
I think that's a big piece of it for sure. And, like we were talking about, I think that, it is such an incredibly different world today. And that's a big piece of what I talk about when I talk to a Fortune 500 client, or if I'm talking at a graduation or, a men's group. It's we have to adjust to this rapidly changing world around us. Heck, I even talked on that topic at a GEO convention in Canada. They were struggling with adjusting, specifically the oil and gas industry. With technology. So how do we adjust to change? And it was one of the questions I was really starting to dig into is, can you become more flexible so that you can more easily adjust to this rapidly changing world around us? And you can. Turns out there's such a thing as cognitive and behavioral flexibility, right? Neural dynamics, experiential learning theory. So I dug pretty deep into the neurosciences. So as parents, and it's important for us to at least acknowledge that there is a need for us to be open to the idea that the world that our kids are growing up in is very different than the world that we grew up in. So step one is acknowledge that and be more curious and open to exactly that they're having a different experience than we had.
You've gone through quite a journey in your life, and both you and your son now exist to kind of share those stories on the other side of that journey, through your life's work, through your book, through this mission that you have, getting on stages and influencing and impacting hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people, right? So there's obviously been a personal development journey for you and for us, and for me personally as event producers. Like when I'm not producing an event, a lot of my growth has come from going to those events, from the people that I want to be like learning with and from, and becoming a spectator and an attendee. So like immersing myself in personal and professional development and finding people who are further along in their life's journey than I am and figuring out like how I can add value to them. So I'm curious, and there's a quote that I wrote down here. It's that when people look outside, they dream, but people who look inside discover. Let me reiterate that. When people who look outside dream, people who look inside discover. And so, when we go to these events, the things we take away just become a flavor, and they become an essence of like who we are. And that just gets added into our work and our relationships. Has there been an exceptional personal development learning experience that's really resonated with you, an event that you've gone to?
Yeah, total breakdown. Not emotionally, but just in the realization that I couldn't save my son. Joseph Campbell popularized the hero's journey, right? In his book, A Man with a Thousand Faces. And, a big part of the hero's journey is where you're called into this adventure. A mentor comes alongside you, and you reach this dark night of the soul. And that's where I was as a father. Every day I woke up and gave him everything I had. And the emotional toll was, I closed my company. And it was so difficult to navigate all the choices between the counselors and school and his mom and to do everything I could to try to save him. That it was just so emotional, so hard, because I loved him so much, and to watch him suffer and I couldn't help him. I was immersed in that, and that was the breeding ground for what's next. And so once we found hope in a residential therapeutic boarding school, and he was starting to heal, I knew that I had to get stronger for the road ahead, for him, for my wife, for me. And that's when one night I'm sitting on the couch, I'm watching YouTube, and it's about 2 a.m. My wife's out of town, and I come across this video, and I'm a boater, not a motorcycle rider. I've never been a motorcycle rider. And I came across this video of these guys riding motorcycles in the backcountry of Colorado, and it sparked something in me. It's like this group of guys with this amazing drone footage, and it was just beautiful. And I just longed for that sense of excitement and connection. And next thing you know, I'd watched all the videos. I dug deep in researching motorcycles, and a month later, I bought my first adventure motorcycle and began to ride. And it instilled in me this capacity to heal and grow stronger. And then I spent 5 years unpacking why I had that relationship to that video. Why did I have a visceral response to that one video of guys riding motorcycles in the backcountry of Colorado? And I started with Google searching the definition of adventure. Yeah. And so that's led me to really where I am today.
What is how can we all be more adventurous? Because adventure, at least for the person watching this, adventure doesn't mean that you have to jump on a motorcycle and travel the country, and just like totally lose yourself in the back roads. It doesn't mean that you need to put a backpack on and go tour Europe for 2 weeks. Now, if you can, those are all great experiences, cool. I'm sure, and you're creating, these moments in your life that you'll forever remember. So would encourage anyone that has the opportunity to go out and do that. But how can we all be more adventurous, like right now in this moment? What are the little steps we can take?
Yeah, this is right in my wheelhouse, right? This is, I've committed my life. When I looked around every day, you see so much so many people really struggling with anxiety, overwhelm, happiness, unfulfillment. And I could feel it when I would leave my house. You can see it in the world. It was in the social and cultural narrative. And so that's what I sought to figure out. I was tired of looking outside of myself, because that's where I started, for help. But then one of the things I found was that everything I needed was already inside of me. So, Simon Sinek always talks about know your why.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, well, that's nice, Simon. That's, but what if I know my why and I know my who, but I don't know how? And I think that actually more people struggle with, okay, I know what I love and what I'm passionate about, what I care about, but I don't know how to have that experience of life that I really desire. And so there's 5 powerful practices that I wrote about in my book. And it really starts with the definition. You have to get uncomfortable. You don't have to sail solo around the world. You don't have to climb Mount Everest. Every single day is the unknown. And so you have to kind of explore that unknown, get uncomfortable, explore the unknown, and seek excitement. Those are the 3, 4, and 5 of the 5 practices. Get uncomfortable, right? Take on a challenge, right? Both inside of you and outside of you. Explore the unknown, both inside of and outside of you, and then seek excitement. And there's twofold to that as well.
I think you and I both did 3 of the 5 of those things before we came to this podcast episode. We both talked about how we took a cold shower before we came here today. And for me...
Separately.
Wait, it wasn't... Yeah. Well, I mean, next time we do it together, we conserve water. But the cold shower was separate.
Just reframing.
Yeah. So... things get weird here at the Impact Roadmap in Utopia. What is Utopia? Utopia is this, this life of, just togetherness and creating this ideal state. And we can only do that when we shower together.
Yeah.
So
we can try it.
But it really is just a shock to the physiology. Yeah. Changing your body chemistry, endorphins are released in your body by taking a cold shower. So something as simple as that, like that for me is an adventurous thing that I know I can commit to every day, that I know is going to change my physiology and get me out of the state of the thinking mind and into my heart,
right,
where I can connect with more people and figure out creatively like how I can add value in this world. So is that what you're talking about? Like, is it meditation? Is it affirmations? Is it the Wim Hof method and cold baths? Is it maybe a combination of all of those things? What else can we do, or what can we do on a daily basis to ensure that we're getting uncomfortable, taking risks, and being adventurous?
When I'm working with a client or speaking with an organization, you align that with whatever your life vision is, whatever whatever you're really passionate about, that vision you really desire for your life, and how the work is to paint a picture, and then you back it in. Like get really, really clear on what you really want your life to look like. And then you identify the things in your life, the areas in your life that are stopping you from having that experience. And usually there's something uncomfortable. There's a barrier, right? We have these limiting beliefs. And so we align those things that you can do to get uncomfortable with that vision, and then push through that barrier, right? So if you're not ready for that, you can start with a cold shower. You can start with taking a different route home or to work. Probably home is better, so you're not late, right? Try a different food. If you're an introvert, maybe ask somebody a question, a stranger a question that you've never met them before, and you're an introvert. Maybe ask somebody a question and get curious and just listen. And there's a lot of different ways, and you can get really creative with how you practice getting uncomfortable. Cold is a big one, right? I engaged in different programs, different challenges, like a Tough Mudder or a 75 Hard, or where you sit down and do things that you're just not used to doing, but are good for you. And I think a lot of people know what that is. They know what they could, should, or be doing that's good for them. They just don't do it.
Why though? Like, is it that people just get stuck? Like they're in this sort of like this conformity of, like you said, driving the same way to work, seeing the same people, having the same conversations, going to a job that they hate, to like buy things that they don't care about, to try and be impressive to people that they don't, try and be impressive to people that they don't necessarily care about.
Right.
It's like, you're not connected to passion, to purpose. And so you just have this mundane existence, or like what's really going on?
Well, I think it's the brain. Most people don't realize that there's a distinction between your brain's thoughts and your thoughts, and they're not one and the same. right? And so the job of the brain is to keep you safe and alive. That's what your brain's job is to do. And so there's a whole exercise of, I remember going through where, a coach is a program I was in, and he sets the stage where it's going to get really, really quiet, and we're going to empty our brains. We're not going to think a single thought. He takes everybody into this experience, and the music gets really calm, and close your eyes. Think nothing. Empty your brain. That thought right there, just let it go. That one, yep, just let it go. Okay, now we're getting there, right? Everybody, no thought at all. Gets really, really quiet. Waits a second. All right, how many people were successful in thinking no thought at all? You can't. It's impossible. Your brain is constantly sifting through thoughts, but then there's your thoughts, like what you want, your choice, and there's a difference. And so most people kind of go through life in this conditioned beliefs, thoughts, behaviors, and actions, and they get the same results. But so those are our conditioned beliefs, thoughts, behaviors, and actions, and we get the same result. If we want to have a different experience, we got to condition, right, through intentional beliefs, thoughts, behaviors, and actions to get a different result. But most people don't know that, and I think a lot of people are kind of wrapped up in status quo, right? We're kind of a herd mentality, right? We kind of do this comparative life where we just want what the Joneses have. And I got news for you. I think the Joneses are gone, right? Like they're not doing us any favors. So yeah, we have to condition new beliefs, thoughts, behaviors, and actions.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points there. I mean, so many good points. I think one of the biggest developments that I've had in my life in going to these personal development events, and I've learned a lot. By the way, there was a little bit of Michael Singer there. I don't know if you know Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, but he talks about how you should be a passenger to your thoughts, how you're not the thoughts, you're the thinker of the thoughts, or perhaps you're the consciousness behind the thinker of the thoughts. Yeah. And so, I mean, pretty philosophical, sure. A lot to unpack there, but it's like, can you just be a witness to those thoughts instead of being emotionally impacted and affected by all of the things that we think? So there's like the Michael, but anyway, so I learned about Michael Singer through Hal Elrod. And Hal Elrod was my life coach for 2 years. And Hal Elrod wrote the book, The Miracle Morning. Are you familiar with his work?
A little bit. I know that book. I have not read it though.
It's amazing. And so through Hal, I got invited to an event called the Front Row Foundation Summit, which is out in Cleveland. And so John Vroman runs the Front Row Foundation, and he's got this program called Front Row Dads.
Fantastic.
And love it, right? It's all about men that are business leaders second, family men first, fathers first, business owners second.
I want to meet this guy.
He's awesome, right? So the whole approach is incredible, and it's all about doubling down on family and having moments and being moment makers and creating experiences. I learned through this personal development and through this coaching that I shifted my mindset from this scarcity mindset that there's not enough in the world and I've got to go out there and get mine before somebody else does, to the abundance mindset that comparison is the thief of joy. So let's not compare. Let's look at others as a way, like, now I look at competition as like, how can I create something synergistic and valuable for someone who might be competing in the same industry? How can I add value to my neighbor in such a way that like helps them have a better day? Like, how can I be a light for other people? And so if we could just shift away from that scarcity mentality to the abundance, there's so much joy, there's so much love, there's so much wealth, there's so much knowledge. Like, how can we give and give and give and then we receive? Like, that has been a huge thing for me in personal development, and obviously a huge influence on my life, has been Hal and this network that I've been a part of. Who's that been for you?
Well,
like, is there a...
I always go back to my father, right? But, I learned a lot from prayer. I learned a lot from, I get these insights daily. I can count on them. I've learned a lot through reading. I went through David Bayer's legendary program Learned a lot there. He's done a great job of organizing a lot of wisdom in the world into a kind of a package where you can digest it and consume it and organize it and understand it. But I completely agree with living from the inside out, moment makers, certainly no scarcity in the world. There's just so much wealth of knowledge and just money.
Yeah.
So now it's, that's something that you were talking about that I identify with, is absolutely living from a place of contribution and celebration, right? So, I mean, I don't get jealous at all. I used to kind of see somebody that would have, if I look at just here in St. Louis, Andy Frisella, right? I mean, that guy's made
billions.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions, billions.
And he's done a great job being proud of being from St. Louis and built these successful companies and cars and what have you. But he's really had a heart for, giving and contributing and, how do I impact the world around me? And then it shows up. And it's really leading with, I came up with a saying, a couple of years ago, leading with your being. And so I think about who am I being first? Everything else follows that. If you're being fearful, scarcity mindset, anxious, right? There's two states of being, primal and powerful. And so, and you can move, and all limiting beliefs stem from that primal state of being. Primal, fear, anxiety, worry, doubt, anger, resentment, right? All of that stuff's primal state of being. And a powerful state of being, creativity, love, kindness, acceptance, all of that's a powerful state of being. The more time you spend in a primal state, that's not going to get you to where you want to go. The results you really want are never going to stem from a primal state of being.
So it's moving up the hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow's triangle, like trying to get to self-actualization.
That's right, exactly. And so the more time, so a lot of the work that I do for myself, my self-work, is how much time am I spending in a primal state versus a powerful state. One of those get uncomfortables was I used to get really frustrated with traffic. Really frustrated. The story I made up about being in traffic was, I must be stupid, right? And I would get in traffic and say that to myself all the time. Because I worked from home. Traffic is miserable. Why on earth, if I am a smart, capable human who has control over my time and location, allow myself to be in traffic if I know that between this hour and this hour, there's probably going to be traffic? Why would I allow myself to do it? I must be stupid. That was my logic. And I'd say that to myself over and over. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, wait a minute. So I look at everything, all contrast I now use as a tool for my own growth. Traffic, patience, right? So what is the contrast in your life, and how can you use it for your own betterment?
Could you also look at traffic and do a simple reframe there, and you're like, wow, there are other human beings that have places to go. Like,
sure,
they have meaning, they have purpose, like they're getting out, and like, I'm not alone on this planet. And there's other people around me that are loved and cared for and appreciated. And like, they're going to see family members and friends and colleagues.
I love it.
So just that simple reframe for me, because I've done something similar where you just get so frustrated in that moment, especially when that guy cuts you off. It's like, but what's that guy going through? Who's he going to see?
Well, and so going back a little bit, like that cognitive behavioral flexibility, how quickly can you adjust to that change or that contrast?
Yeah.
And I think that's not I think, I know that is the outcome of the work that I teach, right? The Living Adventurously mindset and methodology and these 5 powerful practices is that you can train yourself, and this is anchored in neuroscience, right? You can train your brain to become more flexible faster. And so that when you have a contrasting experience, you don't wallow in it and you don't necessarily react, you respond. And you respond in a way that is aligned with how you want to be versus just life's happening to me and I'm a victim.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I found meditation very helpful for this. I meditate every day, twice a day, at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And when I can just get out of the thinking mind, like you went through that program where the guy's like, hey, can everybody not think thoughts for just a few seconds? And like, you realize it's impossible.
Right.
There is no perfectionism in meditation. It's always a practice.
Yep.
It's like, just continue to practice at the thing, which is going inside and
Yeah.
just trying to turn the brain off, for 15 minutes. And do you, by the way, I have Marcus Aurelius's book here, which is called Meditations.
Love it.
Have you had any experience? I know you mentioned prayer a moment ago. Do you have any experience in meditation?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this stems from, this may sound a little bit unusual, but it goes all the way back to when I was a young boy. I was 13, and I was in the middle. Every single night I would go to bed. I was in middle school, and every single night when I went to bed, I would lay on my back with my palms up and my feet up, and I would sit there and say, and pray. And say, thank you, I'd say, forgive me my sins, Lord, forgive me my sins, Lord. And then I would say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I would bring kind of the pure white light of God through the crown of my head, down through into my core, out my arms, out my palms. And I would do that every single, out my feet. And that's how I went to bed every single night from the time I was 13. When I was in the service, there's not a lot of churches in Japan. And so I found myself, I got on a train one Sunday. And I went to, it was just south of Yokohama, Shoji Temple. And I just wandered there in my broken Japanese and found my way there, and asked a monk if somebody could teach me how to meditate. And he introduced me to another monk, and I spent the day there, and he taught me how to meditate. And then I would go back on Sundays and meditate with the monks at the Shoji Temple. Turns out it's one of the largest Buddhist temples in the world. And so that's where I learned to meditate. And so I do that now every single morning. I spend time in meditation and prayer. I call it bookending my days. And so I do it in the morning, and then I do it at night before I go to bed.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's way cooler than my meditation story. I just sit on my couch in the basement and close my eyes and, listen to one of my apps, my meditation apps.
Well, I mean, that's what I do now, but that was my road to get there.
You were hanging out, you were meditating with, in a Buddhist temple with monks.
Well,
that's super interesting.
I was over there,
That's super interesting. Who's your biggest role model or influencer right now in your life? I know you mentioned your dad. You mentioned Andy Frisella. Anybody else in your life right now that's really important to you?
Yeah, I wouldn't consider Andy Frisella a role model. There's just so many. I really enjoy listening to Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think he's brilliant.
I love him.
Yeah, I think he's brilliant. Tom Morris, I think, is brilliant. I love reading Tom Morris's work, Modern Day Philosopher, and I'm fortunate enough to have him involved with my book, and he's heavily endorsed it. So, those are two that kind of top of mind if I think of. And more than anything, I think also are people that are doing the work. I'm involved with an organization called Fathers and Family Support Center. And I think that, if I had a hero today, it would be the men who, and women who have gone through a seriously challenging time, who don't know what the life that I know. And they've had challenges that are far greater than any challenge I've ever experienced. And they're making a powerful new decision. And they're choosing to pave a new path for generations of their families to make a difference in the life of themselves and their children. I think those are the heroes, right? Who don't have the opportunity, who haven't known a world like I know, or They haven't had that experience or privilege or opportunity, but they're making it happen. And they're seeking help. They're submitting their egos to receive guidance and support and help and learning. And they're just stepping out. And I think it's just brave and bold and courageous and beautiful. And they're doing it for the love of their family. And that's stunning.
I love that. I love that those are your heroes. That's incredible. And I think we can learn a lot from that. Your success is somebody else's miracle. So who are those people that you can be a miracle to? And let's all go out and find them in our local communities. And You're right. I mean, by nature of comparison, we do live, I'm living a pretty privileged life. I was born and raised in Chesterfield, and, not everything's been easy, but the people that you speak of, I think of people in my life and some of the nonprofits that we serve and these missions and these causes where I it's very difficult for me to place myself in the shoes of somebody else who's had way more trauma and gone through, wakes up every day and they're just trying to figure out, how am I going to survive?
Truly, what I discovered, it was years ago, I came up with this idea of the Father Project. And like I said, I've always been a passionate father, right? Just love my son to pieces, and he'll never know that. If you just look at the post that I wrote on Facebook today, you'll get a sense of my heart for my son. And why reinvent the wheel? If there's an organization that's already doing what I have a heart to do, let's align with them. So one day I walk in the front door, somebody introduced me to Fathers and Family Support Center in St. Louis. And I walk in the door, and I was given a tour, and we're in the hallway, and this tall, big, gruff man, I mean, his voice was deep, and he had a suit, and he had other men in suits with him. Who are you? And I literally said, I'm nobody. I'm Andy. That's what I said. I'm nobody. I'm Andy. Isn't that something? Well, he said, Sherry, bring Mr. Way up to my office in 15 minutes. He and I spent 4 hours together that day. That was over 15 years ago. 2 years ago, he passed away. When he passed away, and we would have lunch randomly, a $6 million annual budget. He had been in prison. He had, for drug issues. He had a life sentence. Gets out on early parole. Goes to St. Louis Community College. Goes to Washington University, one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Gets his master's degree. And 3 nuns seek him out and they find him to start this program.
Wow.
And he starts this program, but they have no money. So he starts going out into the street, bringing people in that are users and abusers on the corners in the very bad neighborhoods, and brings them in and starts to mentor these men. And he starts Fathers and Family Support Center with these 3 nuns, right? Amazing. So when he passed away, and he builds it up to what it is today. And now Sherry's taken over, Sherry Tillis. And so I've known that team there for a long time. And the work they do is absolutely stunning. But I committed 2 years ago to engage more fully with that program to honor his work. And to do what I can to impact the lives of others. I walk in one day. Can I continue to share a little bit about this?
This is great.
It was nuts, man. I walk in one day, and I want to add value however I can. So I commit to spending 6 weeks in their primary program called Family Formation as me, who's never been in prison, who's grew up very lucky. Now I'm not a polo shirt wearing, golf looking like guy. I don't know if people can see me, but I didn't know how I was going to be received. From 7 to noon is when I committed. And then the first day they asked me to take over the class for an hour. And I start using this coaching conversation, and I ask this question: do you believe that the universe is working for you or against you? And some guys start to answer. And then one of the guys in the class goes, what do you believe? So I believe that the world is working for me. And he looked at me and just shook his head. And the look on his face was, of course you do. Right? Of course you do, white boy. You don't know my struggles. That was this look. He didn't need to say a word. 7 weeks later, I was friends with those men. I still check on them. And they would say, no, we had a nickname for the class of 146 called the Godfathers. And they would say, no, you're a Godfather. And I showed up every single day and learned about what their life. Some of these guys don't even sleep every night. They don't even sleep every night. Some of them pay $1,000 a month. They work 3 jobs. They sleep 4 or 5 nights a week, not for 8 hours like I do, right? And they're paying child support, but they have their kids. And all they've known is their parents were murdered. They never known their father. Their friends were murdered. Like, what a crazy experience. I can't identify with that at all. But you know what they did is made a powerful new decision to fight for the life of their kids and receive guidance and help and support. And they show up or they're kicked out of the program.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about, how we can support that mission.
Cool. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, man.
What else? What have we not? You know what we haven't talked about? We haven't talked about the stages that you step on. As a speaker, you get out there and you, no different than, there's a lot of parallels in our journeys. You are a speaker, you go to a lot of events and you try and share with these audiences. We might be producing those events that you're speaking at.
Yeah.
But you step on those stages. And I think one of the things we try and coach event organizers on thoughtful ways to leverage gratitude to make people feel loved on and appreciated and supported. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's something that is meaningful for you as someone who's stepping on a lot of different stages. You step on a stage and then you get on a plane and then you go to a different stage. Is there like an event that really stands out to you where the organizers did something really unique and meaningful so that you'll remember them? So say 3 years from now, those same event organizers call you and they're like, hey, Andy, would you come back to our event? You're more likely to pick up the phone and say yes because of what they did for you. Or is that a no? And you're like, no, there's a huge opportunity for people to double down on gratitude and making me feel appreciated.
I think that the best answer for that is that I had never seen, my whole family's self-employed. I had never seen myself being able to add value or speak or share my story and message with corporations. I always thought that I would, my avatar is a 35 to 55-year-old accomplished parent of a teenager, right? And so that's who I thought I would be reaching out to one-on-one predominantly. But then I did a shift to one-to-many to speak. And I'm very nervous about speaking. And that there's a story there that I'm happy to share, but I never wanted to speak. Talk about getting uncomfortable. Me speaking, very uncomfortable. And I had to really get over that. But I had been practicing, and so I did. And ultimately, I didn't expect that, shortly after the book, I would receive my first corporate client. It just so happened to be a Fortune 500 company.
That's huge.
It was huge. And I did everything. I shut everything else down and just made sure I was ready. I wasn't blowing this opportunity. I'm going to show up ready. And I never thought I would have anything like to be able to identify with corporate world people. This wasn't my thought. And so when I did, and I shared my talk, I did for 45 minutes. And then I did a 15-minute Q&A, and I got done with that, celebrated the completion of it, and went out to dinner with my wife. And when we came home, there was a note and a bottle of wine, and then the gratitudes kept coming in of just how well it went. The engagement was really high, all of this kind of praise of how good it was. And I had never, right? I thought, I'm never going to be able to, right? To go from can't connect was my story that I was telling myself. I was never going to focus on corporations, to having my first be a Fortune 500 company and have them repeatedly send me emails and notes about how well it went and the ongoing conversations that their organization was having, the participants were having with the organizers was amazing. So just, that was one of the coolest experiences for me in transitioning kind of that bridge from one thought to a broader thought of what was possible with this conversation and the need for it. And so that just was huge for me, and it lit another spark.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the one-to-many, is that kind of is that how you're, reaching people now, is getting on stages and, sharing your story and hoping to connect with people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done coaching, but I had my own coach, and I still talk to her, and we're now friends. And just last Friday, I was, hey, I know that you're not my coach right now, but I could really use your help. I was kind of stuck and going through my own just thoughts around the work I'm doing, and she kind of talked me off that cliff about kind of what to focus on right now. And But so I will coach, but one-to-many is my primary focus right now through speaking. And now I'm positioning to build an entire platform to put all my work on so that people can engage in it that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What are you focused on now?
Speaking in just all stages and speaking, and then building that platform. So it's the same thing. But
sorry, I should have reiterated, because you mentioned I was going off of when you had that conversation with her and said, kind of like help me figure out where to go with the work now. And so I'm just curious, has your focus shifted, or like what is that next iteration of your work?
I think what's happened is there's been, since I released the book, that came out December 12th, and I've gotten some attention. Been on interviewed on the news, lots of different podcasts and radio shows and things of that nature, and that's great. And so now I know, like, that social proof is there, the academic proof is there. I've got all this support. So what do you do? Where do you focus your energy? What are you going to do with all this as it's kind of coming at me as I continue to grow and try to, as I do the work to impact more people and get this conversation in front of more and more people and broader audiences. And I was just struggling, where do I focus? How much time? And I was really, there's so many, what platform is the right platform? What kind of this and that? And there's all kinds of these tools out there. And I'm a researcher, so I don't just like, oh, that's a tool, I'll get it. I don't just go buy a car. I'm researching everything about every model, right? And so I was just feeling kind of overwhelmed and stuck in analysis paralysis.
Sure.
As I prepare myself to take things to another level.
So is it that you were just kind of in a place of like figuring out how to brand and market yourself? And
now I have that, I have all that out there. It's just, where do I focus my energy? With all these tools, it can be allowed, right? I think the world is really coming at us all,
sure,
from a million different directions, and I was just kind of overcome with that a little bit, with where to focus, and it's really just go get 5 more clients like the one you just had.
Yeah.
And so it's that simple, and that's what I love about Wendy. She's like, no, stop everything, just do 5 more of those.
Well, okay. So let's talk about that. So how do you find those 5 clients?
Well, luckily, I have a meeting on Friday. So this is, let me back it up a little bit. What I think is amazing, right? So I go from unpacking this relationship to adventure because of this video. And then I've created this methodology born out of it. And now it's anchored in neuroscience, is backed by a Yale PhD, modern day philosopher, right? Who fully supports my book and this work. Right. And I reference all kinds of neuroscience in the book. So I've done all this kind of social proof, science, academic proof. I didn't know where this was going to go. Right. Always Adventure, which is my name, A.L. Way. Right.
Yeah. I
had no idea. It's my life and my story and my journey. But I've learned some things that I am passionate about sharing to cause this, to help people overcome their struggle with dealing with overwhelm and anxiety, overwhelm, and adjust to change and overcome their challenges so that they can live a happier, more fulfilling life. Well, this has continued to unfold, and who knew that my first corporate client would be a Fortune 500 company?
For sure.
Who could have predicted that? I couldn't have written that out, right? Like that was just amazing. Well, it turns out last Saturday night when we're at a nonprofit fundraising event, I'm in a conversation, and that group within the Fortune 500 company, it turns out there's 12 more of them.
Okay.
It turns out there's 12 more of those within that one company. And so on Friday, I have a meeting to create a strategic path to go to each and every one of those, right? And then that's just one company. And so I have other companies too that are, that there are leads there and some relationships, bridges being built. So that's my right now, right? Just go book more.
Yeah. I just asked because I wasn't sure if it was, like if you were kind of like using like content like this to get out there and build a brand, or if you're just kind of working those like the warm referrals and that type. I'm always curious as to how other people are building their brands and their businesses. So that was why I asked the question, but I appreciate you sharing that.
It's a great question. One of the things that I love is that, there are a lot of talking heads out there. And I used to look outside of myself for help. And there's a time and place for some of that, right? It's great to get some inspiration. It's great to have some information. But what do you do with it? And I really struggled with how. We don't need more noise. We don't need more talking heads. It's how do I use my methodology to give people back to themselves? So I don't know that my time, money, and energy is well served by being another talking head that's coming at people from all directions. There are people like organizations like Express Scripts, one of the largest companies you never heard of before. I got a friend of mine, Sean, never knew what he did. Makes $1 million in 2 days. Let's do that. Let's be really, really impactful without necessarily being a brand you've never heard of before. I kind of like, that's kind of my brand. That's my style, is quiet, but really, really capable. So I'm passionate about that. And
I appreciate that. Flying under the radar.
Yeah, under the radar, but really.
An ode to your past life too, in your your Navy days.
Yeah.
Staying off the radar.
I kind of like it.
Because if you're not, then Andy's going to, if you're on the radar, Andy's going to send a jet after you.
There's plenty of stories like that. Yeah, for sure. Specifically doing avionics and radars. Yeah. That happened one time on the flight deck with a MiG buzzing our tower because he was off our radar. Actual true story.
So tell me about that.
It was nuts. Yeah. We're out in we're out to sea and on the flight deck early morning, getting ready for flight ops. And next thing you know, and we're in a mock war game with UN allies. And next thing you know, there's this plane flies by the aircraft carrier, which is the heart of the battle group, mind you. Lots of radars on a lot of different ships missed this plane. Flies by and then turns and flies right over the flight deck and tips where I could literally see his face, and he's looking at the bridge. Buzzes the tower. Think of Top Gun, right? Buzzing the tower, but actually on a carrier, not on land. And I can see him. That's how close he is. He's flying lower than the height of the bridge on the carrier. Pretty low.
Yeah.
Goes out, circles, does it 2 more times. Finally, our alert-ready aircraft, turns out he was eating breakfast, wasn't where he was supposed to be. And then they launch, and they dogfight off the starboard side of the bow. You see him take off, and he chases him away. Absolutely nuts.
You know who it was? Did you ever find out?
The Russian MiG.
Oh.
Yeah. It was a Russian MiG. Crazy.
That is insane.
It was absolutely insane. We have a couple more stories like that, but we won't go into it.
And there was no.
There were repercussions, but none that I was a part of.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was just a wild experience, right? To see a Russian MiG fly over the flight deck in the middle of a mock war game.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
That's insane. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And we could sit around and have these conversations all day long.
Oh yeah.
It's so interesting. It's just such a foreign world. I don't have any military experience, so I just don't even have I have no idea what goes on in those scenarios. It's just interesting to hear about.
Well, I think that we can all immerse ourselves in a different something, whether it's the military or the Navy. That people have those stories of a friend of mine who's the oldest man to climb the tallest mountains in the world, and the stories he has. I've got another friend of mine who's lived this amazing life, and his mantra is, "I just say yes," and he figures it out. There's something that happens when you get uncomfortable, is that you develop this sense of, when you practice getting uncomfortable, you develop this kind of a swell of confidence, because you establish this belief that you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You can make it, right? You'll be okay. And so if you immerse yourself in something that's maybe a little uncomfortable, it doesn't have to be the military, it can be anything. You start to live these exciting kind of experiences because you went through this challenging thing that kind of tested you a little bit, Maybe that's trying Indian food. I don't know, right? But you were like, I can't believe I went to that restaurant in this certain area I'd never been in, and that was super hot, and I was sweating. It doesn't matter the story, right? But we can all do that, and that's living adventurously to me. Right?
Could living adventurously also be, I wrote this down a moment ago, like what, have you heard of the book, I Love Myself by Kamal? I think it's called I Love Myself, or Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Kamal Ravikant.
No, but
you heard of that?
Fascinating.
But so his whole thing is, we feel shame in loving ourselves. Like we feel that it's shameful or boastful to say, I love myself. And he's like, how do you love on others if you don't love you?
100%.
And so every morning, in his book, he recommends in his book, every morning you should look at yourself in the mirror, connect with yourself eye to eye, face to face, man to man, woman to woman, and tell yourself that you love yourself. And I mean, that's uncomfortable. But like if you can get uncomfortable doing that, you get uncomfortable in the uncomfortable, you build resilience, you build confidence. Confidence creates competence that you can go out there and do the things you need to do.
100%. When I remember being in Costa Rica for a mindset conference, and it was a full moon. We're outside. There's a small group of us, and we were laying on our backs, and it's like kind of like a bedroll. I just took my comforter from my hotel room and kind of folded it in half and had my pillow, and that's what I was we were doing breath work and meditation, and I had never heard of any of that. I had never met any of these people in person. Right, this was the first in person during the whole COVID era. Right, that wasn't that long ago. And I'm sitting out there, and part of the exercise was give yourself a hug. And I remember in thinking about that you're a good person. I remember laying there and hugging myself, and I forgot the guided meditation words he was using, but it was the first time I allowed myself to love me. I was in my, this is not that long ago. I was 47, 46. And I'm hugging myself in tears and accepting myself for who I was, all I am and all I'm not, at a cellular level for the first time in my life, where I really felt that I was okay. I was a good human. And I was in my 40s, mid 40s. And I was in tears. When you're out in the world, I notice now that how people treat others is how they feel about themselves.
That's so true. Can you say that again?
How people treat others is 100% how they feel about themselves.
That's so good.
Right? If they're not kind, then you should actually feel sorry for them because they're really mean to themselves. Right? And that's really sad. I pay attention on a regular basis the conversation I'm having with myself. And that's really critical to how I show up in the world, leading with my being, right? Who am I being? That's all going to stem from how I feel about me. If I know that I have a good heart and I'm a good person, then people are going to feel that. And that's how I'm going to show up in the world. If you're a jerk and you think you're a jerk, if you're being a jerk, then you feel like you have a bad relationship with yourself. It's not good. If you can't love, right? You hate, man, that's how powerfully you show up outward is how powerfully you're showing up inward. And it's a really sad state of affairs in a lot of cases.
Anything else, things that we have not talked about that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Mercy, right? Like some practicing some, obviously the methodology with the practice of allowing, and I think that's critical to all change, right? The practice of allowing is the catalyst for all change. Gratitude, the outcome is positivity. Getting uncomfortable, right? Trust, a deeper level of trust in yourself. And you can't trust others until you trust yourself. Exploring the unknown is insight. That's the fourth practice. You can count on those insights, and they're not random insights. The insights you receive are going to be aligned with the work you're doing in the world. And seeking excitement, be nice, have fun, go play, right? You can expect something exciting to happen when you're seeking excitement and doing the other practices, but it's important to go be intentional about doing something fun. Who couldn't use a little more fun and joy in their life? So I think that those are the 5 practices and the 5 outcomes. And, it's important to just be kind to yourself and to others.
Super grateful for you, Andy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, The Impact Roadmap. It's all about highlighting entrepreneurs that are making an impact, and you certainly are, and the work that you're doing. It's like the world needs that right now. So thank you for doing the work that you are doing, and glad that we have a platform here that we can share your message out and get this into the hands, into the hearts, into the minds of more people, so that you can continue to influence the world. And like what we like to say here at Utopia is help those that help the world. And we want to help you get your message out to more people so that you can continue helping the world. So thank you for doing all the stuff you're doing, my friend. Glad to be a part of your journey and just grateful to know you.
Thanks so much for being here. I feel the same way. Thanks a lot.
Hey, if this episode was valuable to you, then share it with someone that you love, someone that you know that could benefit from it. Also, be sure to subscribe, and depending on how you're listening, go ahead and leave a comment or review. This will help ensure that we are connecting with other nonprofit leaders so that we can get this critical information out to them. And if your company is in the early or even late stages of putting on an event, go to our website, utopiaexperience.com, and click the Book Us tab and schedule a free discovery call to see if our services would be a right fit for your event. And even if they're not, that's okay. I promise you our expertise can steer you in the right direction, so you'll get value either way. Thanks for listening to The Impact Roadmap, and we'll see you next time.